For this demonstration, I'm going to show how Certificate Lifecycle Manager is not just for managing smart cards. It can also be used for what we call software certificates, that is, certificates stored in the user profile. And we're going to be using Microsoft Encrypting File System for this scenario. What's more, we're also going to see how CLM can be leveraged for scenarios where the certificate issuance isn't initiated using CLM. So if we imagine our EFS use case, it's very likely that we'd want to use auto-enrollment capability of Windows, which makes sense, to get the certificates out there to all of our users. But we will leverage CLM, whereby we want to perform recovery operations. For those of you who are presently managing EFS systems, you'll know how complicated it can be to do certificate or key recovery for EFS, and this is going to show how CLM can take your pain away. So we'll also showcase a little bit of EFS functionality. We're going to use the EFS certificate to encrypt a document and demonstrate how our user has access, but other people, even the domain admins, don't have access to it. So that's the introduction. So, as promised, we're not actually going to be using CLM to enroll the certificate. We're going to pretend that we're using auto-enrollment. In reality, we're going to use a certificate's MMC snap-in to enroll an EFS certificate directly from the CA. The bottom line here is, though, that we're actually performing the enrollment external to CLM. The user that's going to be the subject of the EFS certificate is Sally. So I'm going to log in as Sally. Here we go. And I'm going to start up a certificates MMC snap-in, and I'm going to directly request from the certification authority, using the wizard, a EFS encryption certificate. And away we go, as quick as that. And we can see in Sally's certificate store that she now has a certificate for EFS encryption purposes. There we go, encrypting file system. Just as a sneak preview, although we've done that enrollment entirely outside of CLM, CLM does know about that certificate enrollment, and I'll just briefly show you, just a teaser, that CLM does know that Sally has an EFS encryption certificate. So this doesn't happen automatically. This is because I've set up our CLM and our CA to automatically notify, so to speak, CLM of a particular certificate issuance that's external to CLM. It doesn't necessarily follow that you would want all of your certificates to be CLM aware, particularly certificates for machine-based certificates, which actually CLM doesn't support. Certificates such as IPsec for IPsec or wireless authentication. But I'm not going to show you any more CLM. We're going to come back to that in a minute when we show how we can leverage CLM for these EFS certificates, specifically for recovery purposes. But for now, I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration using the EFS certificate that we have. So I'm going to close down our browser we have for CLM, and I'm actually going to start up Sally's Windows Explorer and pick a folder where we want to set EFS encryption. So in this particular folder I have a document, not particularly interesting but security sensitive, and Sally wants to have this folder and the contents of the folder encrypted. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually enforce encryption on that folder. So here we are, we're saying that we want to encrypt the contents of that folder for security purposes. And apply, and we get the opportunity to apply to all the files in the folder, which is what we want to do. The first thing that's apparent is that the document name is changed to a green colour rather than the black text, which is indicative that the file's been encrypted. As far as Sally's concerned, when she accesses the file, she doesn't have to have any kind of awareness that that's now encrypted. She just opens it just in the same way she would any other file. It's just entirely transparent to her, and the decryption is going on seamlessly in the background. Just to demonstrate this document is truly encrypted, we'll log on as a different. We'll access the document as another person. To do that, I'm going to run up Windows Explorer as our domain administrator. I have to perform a little bit of a trick here, so I'm going to start up Explorer. Okay. So we're now accessing Windows Explorer as a domain administrator, and if I now access this secret stuff folder and the my secret document, we'll get an error message telling us that even our domain administrator can't open the file because our domain administrator doesn't have access to the decryption key associated with the Sally's Encrypt EFS certificate. We're now going to consider a couple of scenarios where losing access to Sally's EFS certificate, or more specifically a decryption private key, actually can pose problems because we can no longer access the document. One classic scenario is because of the fact that the certificates and the key material is stored in the user's profile. If that user profile got deleted, then Sally would lose access to the documents which she's encrypted using those aforementioned keys. Another scenario is where Sally has left the company. She's left some documents behind which have been encrypted, and for whatever reason there's a requirement to access the content of those documents, and that's the scenario which we're going to focus on for the remainder of this demonstration. Just for utmost confidence, I'm going to delete Sally's EFS certificate and the corresponding private key. So I'm going to open up her certificate store, delete it, and I'm just to flush it from memory, I'm just going to log out as Sally and log back in again. There is a caching process with decryption keys, then I want to be sure for the demonstration that we cannot see those files. So I'm now going to access the secret stuff document, and we can see that Sally even can no longer access the document. Furthermore, I'm just going to close that Word document because our use case is that Sally has left the company. It's likely that we would have some kind of automatic process such that when Sally left, we would also revoke her encryption certificate. So we want to do that as well. To do that, I'm going to log in as our domain account. And access CLM as our security officer, who is going to initiate the revocation of Sally's EFS encryption certificate. More likely, if you have ILM 2007 and the CLM management agent, you can have all this happening automatically as part of the deprovisioning process for any one user. So as our security officer, Alan, I'm going to search for Sally, and I'm going to select the EFS certificate that she has, and I'm going to revoke it and provide a reason. Okay, so we've now completed the disablement of that EFS certificate, effectively the revocation, and we're now going to move on to recovery. So let's just close down this browser window, and just to double check that we definitely can't access that file. Okay, so we now have a scenario where Sally has left, and we imagine that Sally's manager has requested a security officer to recover a decryption key, because for whatever reason Sally's manager wants to be able to access the documents which she's encrypted. So the request has gone to the security officer, so I'm going to log in as the security officer to CLM, and we're going to search for Sally, information about Sally. When I look at the user details for Sally, I can't see any active certificates. I do know that there's been a lot of activity on Sally's account, but all of Sally's certificates have been disabled. So if I actually select the disabled status, we can see all of Sally's history for certificates. So you can see I've been doing a number of this demonstration using Sally, and that's all the history of Sally's certificates. And I actually could recover any one of those encryption certificates, but for the purposes of the demonstration today, it would be of no value, because I'm only interested in the one that we enrolled for this morning, because that was the one that was used to encrypt the document. So I'm just going to select the latest one, which was the top of the list, and I'm going to start what we call a recovery on behalf of. So actually what we're doing here is a security officer is recovering the certificate on behalf of Sally, sort of. I mean, in reality, the security officer is doing this for Sally's manager, but technically speaking, it's on behalf of Sally. So I'm going to start this request, create the request, and that's been implemented. It's automatically being approved. So what thing I would say here is, ordinarily around key recovery and certificate recovery, we'd more likely have a number of approvals around, or maybe at least one approval, so that one security officer by themselves could not perform a recovery operation end to end. But I've not included that for the purpose of this demonstration, and I'm just going to execute the recovery. So I'm now prompted for a password. Because we're recovering a software type certificate as opposed to a smart card based certificate, we're ultimately going to be ending up with what's called a PKCS 12 file, or a PFX file. That's a file that includes a certificate and the private key. That file will have password protection on it, so that anybody receiving that file needs to know the password before they can import the key material into the certificate store. So I'm going to assign this as just a password associated with that export file. And done that. CLM has gone off to the certification authority and recovered the certificate and the private key, and it's manufactured the PFX file for me. I'm now going to click on this link, which is going to allow me to download it. So I'll save it in the C drive, Sally's EFS keys. I'm overwriting a previous one. Yep, and that's complete. And I can close down CLM now. What I'm going to do now is that all we've done there is import we've download the PFX file, but it hasn't actually imported the certificates and the private key into a certificate store. So I'm going to double click on that file, and it's going to start the certificate import wizard, and I'm going to be prompted to enter the password which we set just a moment ago, and we're going to import that into our certificate store, and that was successful. So now, with any luck, when I access the secret stuff folder, I should be able to open that document. And okay, so that's it, we performed a recovery. I've cheated a little bit. I've installed the certificate into the store of our domain administrator, whereas it may be that we would have distributed that PFX file using some secure channel to Sally's manager, but for the purpose of the demonstration, I think that's illustrated what I wanted to do here. To round this demonstration off, we're just going to have a look in CLM to see what audit information is recorded about those tasks we've just performed. So let's close this down, and I'm going to access CLM as our security officer and search for Sally. So we'll see what information we know about Sally. Right, so what we can see here is that there's one active certificate. So here we can see it's active. We can also see it's revoked, because we ought to remember that this certificate was disabled when Sally left the company, and so that certificate was revoked. So even though it's been recovered, it's still revoked. We can still see, if I click on disabled, we can see all those previous tasks, all those previous enrolments. But I'll go back to the active one, which is the one which we've just recovered, and I'm going to click on the representation of the certificate. So here we can see some general information, just reiterating that it's been recovered and it's assigned to Sally. What I'm going to do now is actually look at the details of the request so we can see what went on with that recovery process, more specifically the history. So what we can see here, the initiator, the creator of the request to do a recovery on behalf, and it's quite clear that it's Alan. A bit of a trick here is because we specified no approvals as far as CLM is concerned, that means that the CLM service will automatically approve it. But if we had an extra approval step, actually we declared a particular community of users as being in the approval entitlement, we would see here the actual name of the person who performed the approval. Similarly, the actual execution task again could have been a different person. And then we can see all the way through to downloading the PFX file from CLM. We can see everything that's happened along the lines on the recovery process for the certificate. And that completes the demonstration. Thank you.